Funny thing about preaching is that there are certain subjects you're afraid to touch, and some of the reasons you're afraid to touch them is because you know either the week of your preparation or the week following it, you're probably going to be tested with what you just talked about. And I don't know if that is purposeful or if you're just more sensitive to the idea, but I have certainly found it to be true. This year we're talking about Christian community, life together, and the incomparable joy that it brings to us. And we've spent our time looking at the foundations of this, that God is a God in community, and He invites us to live in community, and that's an imperative for us to understand. We've been talking about attitudes. We've talked about having a realistic view that we're not perfect, mistakes are going to be made, and we have to figure a way to work through them. We've talked about the importance of humility, thinking of ourselves less. And when we do that, a lot of our problems end up going away because a lot of our problems are created when we're focusing on ourselves. Where we come to today is dealing with patience. And especially patience when it comes to exercising self-control, gentleness, and forgiveness. Patience is necessary for any relationship to work. It's necessary for our home lives. It's necessary for our marriages, for our relationships with our children. It's necessary especially in churches. Because churches are composed of people who are different. And one of the things that we have to learn is that differences aren't curses. Differences are blessings, if you will let them be. But sometimes we get into the notion that we want everybody to be like us. Well, if everybody were like us, that would be an even bigger problem. We need differences of opinions. We need different personalities. We need different things pulling and pushing us in different directions. And so when we take this realistic view of the church that mistakes are going to happen, that we're going to hurt each other, then we have to also understand that there's going to be a time where there has to be forgiveness, and even before forgiveness, we have to exercise self-control and gentleness. And many times that can preclude us having to go through the processes of forgiveness if we can control ourselves and conduct ourselves. And so this morning I want us to think in Ephesians 4. We'll look at the first 3 verses of Ephesians 4 and then the last 2 as we try and unpack this idea of patience. Now, in the Ephesian letter, we're going to look at this in 2 different ways. First of all, he gives us basically 2 reasons behind why we're to be patient with each other. And then he walks us through the details of the requirements of what it looks like to be patient and gentle and forgiving. And so first of all, we think about the reasons. In Ephesians 4, 1 through 3, let's just go ahead and read these verses and put them in front of us. I, therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. From those 3 verses then, the first idea, the first reason is because we are going through a process of transformation. Now, we don't necessarily see this in English, but it is very clear when you read it in its original language. And that is the first 3 chapters. The book of Ephesians is one of the most symmetrical books that there is. It's easily divided. It's just perfectly designed. Not that the others aren't, but this one, at least for a structural thinker like me, it's perfectly designed. So in the first 3 chapters, there is a focus on what God has done for us. And so sometimes when we're describing the first 3 chapters of Ephesians, we will call them doctrinal indicatives. Now here's what that means. The indicative mood in Greek is the mood that you use to state a fact. This is what was done, fact. Okay? So doctrinal indicatives. And so the message of the first 3 chapters is this is what God has done. Now the second 3 chapters, the second section, is what we call moral imperatives. Where you have indicative statements of facts in the first 3 chapters, you then have imperatives. This is what we should be. This is who we should be in chapters 4 through 6. And so the message is, when you put those 2 things together, is simply this. What God has done for us it is imperative that we change and become like Him. That what He has done for us, these indicative actions, lead us to moral imperatives and transformations. We should be different based upon what God has done for us. And so, that's ultimately where it all stems from. And so, for an example, when we talk about the transformation process and being changed into His image, all of that is rooted in chapter 2, verses 1 through 10, where He talks about how God radically changed us. How we ourselves were dead, walking according to the course of this world and the prince of the power of the air. But God, who is rich in mercy because of the great love with which He loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses and sins, He made us alive together with Christ. He took us and He transformed us. Okay? Now, the reason why this is such an imperative idea is because if you pay close attention to our own language that we use, we view ourselves as passive participants in our lives. For an example, you've heard people say, we're talking about this subject here, we're talking about interpersonal relationships. You've heard people say, I just don't like that person. Let me ask you something. Who controls how you feel? You see, when we say, I just don't like that person, then that takes it, the responsibility is not on me. I just can't do it. Instead of understanding, okay, that may be my present situation. I may struggle with this individual, but that doesn't give me a license to stay in that position. Now, I understand that's not a popular answer, but I do believe it is a biblical answer. That we learn, we are responsible, we can change the way that we feel. And the biblical prescription for changing the way that we feel toward people is in changing the way that we treat people and view people. So, for an example, I listened to a phenomenal discussion yesterday when I was getting ready. And John Maxwell was talking about these principles. And the basic thrust of the message and one of the points he was making was this: if I view you as valuable, I will serve you. You see, most of the time we kind of have this notion, this is what he said that was kind of setting the stage for that statement. We have the notion, okay, if you're broken, I will fix you. If you need something, I will provide for you. He said, but that is far different than saying, but I value you and therefore I will serve you. The others are one-time things. I write a check. I send you to a counselor. I sit down with you and I try and help you. They have a beginning point and they have an end point. But if I value you, which has no beginning and has no end, then I will serve you because I hold you as valuable. And God doesn't give us a choice that we can look at people and go, I don't have to value that one. I don't have to like that one. We must learn to value each other completely. And that's why it's so important when people say, look at who they are. Yes. But with all respect, look at who you are. Look at who you are. For some reason, we can be gracious with our own shortcomings, but we can't extend that same patience toward others. That's not the way God acts. And it's not the way we're supposed to act. So we have to go through a process of transformation. But even more than this, it's also a belief in preservation. Notice what he says in verse 3, eager to maintain or to guard the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. In Ephesians 2:11 through 22, he talks about how Jesus broke down this middle dividing wall of hostility and brought Jews and Gentiles together in the church. And by the way, their differences were far greater than any differences we share. He brought them into the church, and the Spirit is building us together for a dwelling place of God. Okay? Now, in this same discussion yesterday, I was listening to a lot of phenomenal statements. I love Maxwell for that reason. But one of the statements he made that also stuck with me was this. He said, differences are inevitable. Division is a choice. Differences are inevitable. Division, letting the difference get between you, that's a choice you make. And people say, well, this is hard. Yes. Yes, it is hard. But it's what we're called to do. We are bound together when we disrupt the peace that exists. When we disrupt the harmony, when we try and make it about my handful of things that I'm on a soapbox about, then what I'm saying is what I value should take precedence over every other person in this room. We have to be about something bigger than ourselves. And some people can't understand that. They think that that's buying in or that's copping out or you're just walking the company line. That's not what it means at all. You see, some people, they have this notion when they see something wrong with churches, what they do, this is the equivalent of what they think we should do. Well, that church is just all messed up. And so that's the equivalent of walking to a house and just lighting a match and burning it down and say, I'm doing God's work, I just burn it down. No, you did not. The answer was not to burn the thing down. The answer was to renovate it. The answer was to renovate it. To make changes. To help bring about change. And no, you can't will change. You can't force change, but you can lead it. If you've got the patience. And so, this is about preserving the unity that exists. And if I choose to let differences come between us, and it is a choice, when we divide, it's a choice. It's a choice that I made in selfishness. Why does it have to be my way? That's the question. So the reasons why this is an important thing is, number one, we're supposed to be being transformed into who God is. His actions toward us should inform our actions toward other people. And also, it's about preserving what God has created. The church doesn't belong to us. It belongs to God. And we have to exercise wisdom. So now let's think then about these requirements as he tries to kind of flesh some of these out for us. First of all, he encourages us to have self-control, or translated here in verse 2 as patience. The idea behind the term patience itself is long in coming to anger, endurance, bearing up under provocation. Well, here's the thing. People say, that person, he always pushes my buttons. All right, I'm with you. I'm with you. But if somebody that always pushes your buttons gets a reaction out of you, they control you. Do you understand that? They control you. You're not proving that you're a man or a woman and you're not going to take anything off anybody, because all you're proving is that people can control you. That's it. It's kind of like, I remember an occasion where somebody was kind of bragging about someone. They're like, they're just so hard-headed, you know. They won't listen to anybody. If you tell them to go right, they'll go left. And I was like, well, that's easy to manipulate. If I want to go right, I'll tell them to go left. Like, what's so hard about that? That's something to be proud of? I can literally play you like a fiddle. Then he says, bearing with one another in love. I love the way this could be translated. You put up with. Now, one of our favorite American phrases is, I'm not putting up with that. If you love Jesus, you will learn to put up with stuff. Because I can guarantee you, Jesus puts up with stuff from you and from me. We will learn to put up with things. We are going to do things that annoy each other, that test one another's patience. The question is, do we have control of ourselves? Do we have quick annoyance and anger triggers? Can we take it and keep going? What if the person is saying something that's trying to hurt you? Listen, someone can say something to you, and this is a really, really extreme ownership type principle. Somebody can say something to you with every intention of trying to hurt you, but it only hurts you if you decide to let it hurt you. It only hurts you if you decide to let it. I know you're just taking a low shot. I know you're just digging. But what's the other choice? I'm going to sit here and stew on it for weeks and weeks and weeks? What's the choice? I mean, you can. I've done it. It's miserable for you and it makes people around you miserable. Or you can be this is the point, you become so mission-minded, people saying things about you in a negative way, it doesn't really affect you. You listen to it, you try and see if there's any truth to the criticism that's being offered, even if it's being offered in an ugly way. You still try to listen to it, ask yourself, is this something that's true? Do I need to think about this a little bit more? But you take what you can keep from the criticism, you throw the rest of it away, and you go back to your job. That's just what you do. And so it's very important that we learn to practice this, that we learn to put up with one another. That doesn't, listen, by the way, put up with does not mean, would you please get on my nerves? I just love it when you get on my nerves. We're not talking creepy stuff. We're talking real. You may be telling yourself the whole time, shut your mouth, shut your mouth, shut your mouth. Do not respond, do not respond, do not respond. But if I see you as valuable, and I see you as someone who belongs to God, I won't view myself as having a right to hurt you. That's where the difficulty comes in. So self-control. Number 2, the idea of gentleness. If you just do a word study of gentleness and see where it is all throughout Scripture, it's actually quite amazing that gentleness is a key characteristic of the people of God. One definition behind the word translated gentleness is this: the quality of not being overly impressed by one's sense of one's self-importance. Not being overly impressed by your one sense of self-importance. And here's one of the things I found. The people who are truly deemed to be invaluable to organizations do not view themselves that way. They don't view themselves that way. So I like to, Dr. Gallagher, I like to pester him quite a bit. He is and I don't say that, I just say this to kind of put it in context. When I tell you he is a world-renowned scholar, he is known and respected all over the world. Even people who disagree with him, they respect him. Now, I say that to say this. So one of his new books was coming out, and it was on social media, and an individual that shared it and liked it was another individual of similar stature in this world of biblical scholarship. And so I screenshotted it and I emailed it to him because he's not on social media. And I was like, hey, look, you've made it. You're kind of a big deal. His response, big deal. He does not see himself as a big deal. And when you don't see yourself as a big deal and you don't take yourself seriously, when somebody then becomes critical of you, you don't look at them and go, do you know who I am? I guarantee you, Dr. Gallagher will be here next Sunday morning. I'll be out of town. He'll be here next Sunday morning. After he's done preaching, you could walk up to him as angry as you are and look at him and point your finger at him and say, I don't agree with what you said. And he would look at you and say, I might be wrong. What do you mean? And he would sit and listen and discuss with you and try and learn from you. If you view your credentials, if you view your position, if you view those things as entitlement, you will take it personally every time somebody disagrees with you or you perceive that they slight you. People say, what does this have to do with gentleness? Everything. Because if you don't see yourself as a big deal, you learn to treat everybody as a big deal. You learn to treat everybody as valuable. Which means I'm not going to mow over you. Even though maybe I could. This is so important in how we handle people. You remember, this is a fruit of the Spirit. If a person is not gentle in the way that they treat people, it's because of the failure to let the Spirit operate in their lives. Because the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. People say, well, he's a mature Christian. Yeah, but he's also really gruff and angry. Then he's not a mature Christian. Because one of the hallmarks of mature, Spirit-led Christianity is gentleness. And it's what we have to learn to be. And people say, well, you know, that sounds good when you're in church, but that doesn't really translate into every part of life, okay? I don't agree with you, but I'll just give you one example. People say you can't be gentle. You can't be gentle in athletics. Tony Dungy is one of the winningest coaches in NFL history. And he has never raised his voice any higher than that level I have it right now. And he does not use cuss words. And yet he can somehow produce gentleness. But then there has to be, when the time comes when we don't control ourselves, when we don't exercise gentleness and we mess up, then we have to learn how to forgive each other. Notice what he says should be put away from us. Verse 31, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away along with all malice. All bitterness, this just kind of, some people, they're just angry at the world. It's like they wake up ticked off in the morning and it's like there's a chip on their shoulder and they're waiting on somebody to come by and knock it off. That's not a Christian disposition. Bitterness, wrath, anger. The idea of a temper, a quick temper, and deep-seated anger that holds resentment. Holding grudges is not a spiritual thing. Having a temper, which is another thing we say, what? I can't control. It's just who I am, man. I got a quick temper. As long as you talk about it passively like that and think about it passively like that, then yes, you will be a victim of your temper. But when you decide you can actually control your temper, and I'm telling you as somebody who had a hair trigger temper, you can control it. So anger, wrath, clamor, what are these? Yelling matches. Where we're yelling at each other and we're fighting each other. That's not who Christian people are. Shouting matches. By the way, how many things you have ever been resolved in your life by yelling at somebody? Now, I'll give it to you. You might lord it over someone and scare them with your temper. And you might get them to do what you want them to do. But you didn't help anybody. You abused them. He says that's not who we are. And you want to know how bad this can get? I've been in the room with one man yelling while the person being yelled at looked at the other Christian men in the room and said, "Are y'all okay with this?" The other Christian men simply responded, "That's just how he treats family." Then he treats his family wrong. And furthermore, I'm not a member of his direct family. They might tolerate that. I don't sit in situations like that. Slander, blasphemy. You know, when we have this ability to sometimes always put in that caveat, this person is a good person, but. And like one of my teachers used to say, by the time you're done butting them, there's nothing left of them. Right? You butt them to death. Along with all malice, just a mean-spiritedness. You know, sometimes I think people mean well when they say certain things like this, but they tell me sometimes, you know, it must be nice to work at a church because, you know, everybody's just nice. You obviously have not worked at a church very much. I'll be honest with you. Some of the meanest people I ever met were church members. And I think probably what made it so bad is because they tried to cloak their meanness in religiosity. That's just not who we are. So who are we? What does Paul say? Be kind to one another. If I've learned anything, and listen, I think I would like to say I've always loved and valued people. I don't know that I certainly did not love them and value them the way that I do now. Not that I've got a lot to learn there as well. But you know, one of the things that changed the way I saw people was when I stopped trying to control people and just chose to love them as they were. Changed everything. And that I can come to church and I can be upset that this person didn't talk to me, or that person didn't talk to me, or they didn't say this, or they didn't say that. Or I can actually come to church and go, you know what? I don't know what the day has held for the people who are walking in this building. I don't know what the week has been like for them. But you know what? I can at least be a kind, positive interaction with them. Look, You interact with teenagers, they're going to think you're boring, they're going to think you're lame, they're going to think your jokes are stupid, whatever. As long as they remember. Somebody wasn't being unkind to them, somebody was noticing them. You never know what people are going through. Be kind to people. Be kind to people. Tender-hearted. Tender-hearted. To try and see the world through their eyes, to feel for them in their situation. It's kind of like, again, I go back to this discussion with Maxwell yesterday because it was so phenomenal. He's like, I'm going to tell you a parable about a pit. So there's a pit. And a guy, he falls into the pit. And an optimist comes along to him and says, if you believe strongly enough, you can get yourself out of the pit. Pessimist comes along and says, well, you deserve to be in the pit. Another person comes along and says, yeah, you've got a pit there, but it's not as bad as mine. Or you can do what Jesus would do and you can help people out of the pit. Now, don't tell me we don't do that to people. Your marriage is in trouble, you got problems with your kids, you got problems with your faith, you got problems here, you got problems there. Well, it's because you didn't do this and because you didn't do that, and you know, if you would have been more positive here and less negative here, just help people. Just help them. Be tender-hearted. The bottom line is this, and it's one of the fundamental principles. When somebody comes to you seeking help, they already know they have a problem. They don't need you to pound them over the head with the problem more. They need you to help them fix it. Be tender-hearted. Forgiving one another. Being willing, and listen, the idea behind forgiveness is this. I'm not going to let what you said or did affect the way that I view you and treat you. Now, is that a magical process? No. Does that mean that especially shortly after it happens, when you see that person that's hurt you, that you're not going to conjure up all those thoughts in your head immediately when you see them again? No, of course you will. What determines whether or not I'm a truly forgiving person is, do I let that affect the way that I treat you? One of the things about Christianity is simply that we can behave ourselves into the right feelings. If I continue to treat you kindly and to be kind to you, regardless of the hurt that I feel on the inside as I'm dealing with it, as I'm working with it, my emotions will catch up. They'll catch up. But that's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is getting us off the merry-go-round. Because usually what happens, this is the way the world operates, usually what happens is this: I hurt you, you hurt me. Then I hurt you again, and you hurt me. Then I hurt you again, and then you hurt me. And on and on and on and on and on, we just keep trading blows and one-upping each other. Forgiveness is when one person is strong enough to say, I'm stopping the cycle. I am willing to take the blow and absorb it and stop the force. It's like an energy that moves. And what I'm saying is this: the energy that just hit me, it's going to find me and die. I'm not going to let it continue to grow. Forgiveness is hard. But forgiveness is the only way. How do you stay married if you can't forgive each other? Listen, if if we can embody these attitudes within ourselves, and these attitudes become the definition of our church culture. And church culture is very different than church vision. Vision, everybody wants to talk about vision. You got to have a vision. You got to know where you're going. I know of a church, they did a 50-year plan. I'm like, 50 years? The guys who wrote it will be dead. 50 years ago, an iPhone didn't exist. Good, a 50-year plan, what good is that? I'll tell you one thing that will eat vision for breakfast. Culture. And culture is what you do. Culture is who you are. And if you have a culture that will practice self-control, gentleness, and when they lapse in that, they can practice forgiveness, you cannot stop a culture that does that. You can't stop it. So the question for us is, are we willing to do the hard work to become like and to treat one another and other people the way that God has treated us? And if we're willing to come to Him with a penitent faith, confessing Jesus to be baptized in water for the forgiveness of our sins, or maybe we're struggling with something else, maybe we're struggling with a sin, maybe we're struggling with life in general, we want to help each other. We want to learn to practice patience and gentleness and tenderheartedness and compassion and forgiveness. And if we can help you this morning, that's what we want to do as we stand and sing this song.